The sun burned high over the desert sky, casting sharp shadows across the dry, cracked earth. A lone woman staggered forward, sand clinging to her feet, her breath short and heavy. Her name was Hagar, young, pregnant, and alone. But before this moment, before the wilderness and the pain, before she ever knew the God who sees, Hagar was just a servant. An Egyptian girl taken from her homeland, forced to serve in the house of a man named Abram and his wife, Sarai. She had no rights, no freedom, just orders to follow and silence to swallow. Sarai was a woman with a deep pain in her heart. God had promised her husband, Abram, a future filled with children, more than the stars in the sky. Abram believed. He even heard God say, "Count the stars, if you can. That's how many children you will have." Genesis 15 verse 5. But Sarai's arms remained empty. Year after year, no baby came. She waited. She prayed. But heaven stayed quiet. One evening, something in her broke. "The Lord has kept me from having children," she said to Abram. "Sleep with my servant. Maybe I can build a family through her." Genesis 16 verse 2. Hagar had no say. She wasn't asked. She was given. Passed like property from one hand to another. Could she say no? Could she run? Not in a world where servants had no voices. And so, she was sent to Abram. One night changed everything. Hagar became pregnant. In that moment, her world shifted. She was no longer just a servant. She was now the mother of Abram's child, the child that Sarai had longed for, the one everyone had waited for. At first, Hagar walked softly, but slowly, her steps grew bolder. She began to lift her head higher. She was carrying life, something her mistress could not. She began to see herself differently, and she began to see Sarai differently too. Sarai noticed. The silent glances became sharp stares. The peace in the house shattered. "She looks at me like I'm less than her," Sarai told Abram. "This is your fault. I gave her to you, and now she mocks me." Genesis 16 verse 5. But Abram stayed out of it. "She's your servant. Do with her whatever you want." Genesis 16 verse 6. That's all Sarai needed to hear. The punishment came quick. Harsh words, heavy tasks, cold stares. Hagar, once bold, now bent beneath cruelty. Day by day, the house that once fed her turned into a prison. And one morning, she could take no more. With trembling hands and a swelling belly, she ran. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away. The desert welcomed her with silence. Endless sand, burning wind, no food, no water, just the heartbeat of fear pounding in her chest. She was alone. Or so she thought. Because someone was watching. A presence, quiet and unseen, moved toward her as she collapsed near a spring of water. She could go no further. Her strength was gone. And then, she heard a voice. "Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going?" Genesis 16 verse 8. She gasped. How did this stranger know her name? She looked up, eyes wide with fear and confusion. No one had ever spoken her name with such kindness, such knowing. This wasn't a man. This was the angel of the Lord, a messenger from heaven itself. Hagar's journey had brought her to the edge of death, but instead, she had arrived at a meeting with the divine. And what the angel told her next would change her life forever. Hagar sat by the spring, exhausted. Her arms trembled as she held her belly. Her lips were dry, her eyes sore from crying. She had escaped the cruelty of Sarai, but now she faced a different enemy: emptiness, hunger, thirst, death. Then that voice again, calm, strong, not from a man, not from a shadow, a presence. "Hagar, servant of Sarai," the voice repeated. "Where have you come from, and where are you going?" She froze. No one had called her by name like that. Not in kindness. Not in concern. "I'm running away," she whispered, her voice barely a sound. "My mistress. She's too harsh. I couldn't take it anymore." Silence followed, deep and thick. Then the angel spoke again, and the words hit her like a wave. Go back to your mistress. Submit to her. What? Go back? Back to that place of pain? Before she could protest, the angel continued, but listen to this. And then came the promise. I will give you more descendants than you can count. Genesis 16 verse 10. Hagar's heart skipped a beat. You are pregnant with a son. You will name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your cries. Genesis 16 verse 11. Her eyes filled with tears. God heard. God saw her pain. She was no queen, no leader, no chosen one. Just a servant, a runaway, a nobody. But God saw her, and that changed everything. She had heard of Abram's God, the God who made the stars, the God of promises. But she never thought that God would care about her. Not someone like her. But now, in the middle of the desert, at her lowest moment, heaven reached down and called her by name. She looked around, trembling. Could it be? Had she just seen God? She whispered the words slowly, afraid and amazed. You are El Roi, she said, the God who sees me. Genesis 16 verse 13. It was the first time anyone had called God that name. And that spot, that spring where she had nearly died, would never be forgotten. She named it Beer-lahai Roi, the well of the living one who sees me. Genesis 16 verse 14. Still shaking, Hagar wiped her face. Her fear had not disappeared, but it had changed. She was still a servant, still pregnant, still walking back into pain. But now, she was seen. She was heard. She had a promise from heaven. So she rose, touched her belly gently, and turned back toward the place she once fled. One step at a time. Not as a runaway, not as a slave, but as a woman who had met God in the desert. And she carried his words with every heartbeat. She would survive. She would give birth. And her son's name, Ishmael, would forever remind the world. God hears. The desert wind blew against Hagar's face as she walked back to the camp. Her steps were slow but steady. Her heart was stronger now, not because her problems were gone, but because she knew someone greater was with her. She had met God. He saw her. He spoke to her. And he gave her a promise. Still, going back was not easy. The same tents, the same faces, the same silence from Sarai. Nothing had changed on the outside, but inside Hagar, everything was different. Time passed. Her belly grew round and heavy. Every movement from the child inside reminded her of the day by the spring, the day God found her. Then one night, the moment came. Her cries pierced the quiet desert air. Servants rushed around. Abram waited outside, tense and silent. Then, the cry of a baby boy filled the night. A son. Hagar held him close, tears streaming down her face. Not just from pain, but from the power of what had just happened. She had brought life into a world that once tried to crush her. Abram entered the tent, and for a moment, he just stood there. Then, Psalms. What shall we call him? Someone asked. Hagar stepped forward. Ishmael, she said softly, because the Lord has heard me. And Abram nodded. Ishmael, a name that rang with the voice of heaven. A name born from pain but soaked in purpose. God hears. From that day on, Ishmael grew under Abram's watchful eye. The boy was strong, wild like the wind, quick like the desert fox. His skin was darkened by the sun. His laughter echoed through the tents. He wasn't just any child. He was Abram's firstborn, the first boy from Abram's blood. Could he be the heir, the one God promised? Many wondered. Even Abram hoped. Hagar, though still a servant, walked with more dignity now. She knew her son was not an accident. He was seen. He was heard. He was chosen, not by man, but by God. But shadows were building. 13 years passed. Ishmael grew into a teenager, full of fire, full of questions, full of strength. But one day, the camp shifted again. God spoke to Abram. And this time, the message was different. God said, "Your wife Sarai will give you a son. Abram was stunned. Sarai, at her age. And not just that, God gave the child a name before he was even born, Isaac. Isaac would be the child of the promise. Isaac would be the one through whom God's covenant would continue. This news hit Hagar like a silent storm. For years, she had raised her son as Abram's only child. But now, another baby was coming. Another boy. And this time, it would be through Sarai, the very woman who once cast her out. The one who had cursed her name. Everything was about to change again. The desert had quieted for a while, but another storm was coming. And Hagar could feel it, deep in her bones. She held Ishmael close that night, brushing the sand from his face. She didn't know what the future held. But she did know this. God still saw her. And no matter what came next, that truth would keep her standing. The sound of laughter filled the air. Little Isaac was weaned, and the whole camp gathered to celebrate. Music, food, dancing. Sarai's joy knew no bounds. Her miracle child had finally come. But in the corner of the celebration, two figures stood silently, Hagar and Ishmael. Ishmael, now a teenager, watched the younger child with narrowed eyes. Perhaps he laughed. Perhaps he mocked. Maybe he just didn't understand. But Sarai saw it, and that was all it took. Her face tightened. Her heart burned with old jealousy. The sight of Ishmael reminded her of the years of shame, of barrenness, of a time when she was the one who felt forgotten. She turned to Abraham. "That slave woman and her son," she hissed. "Get rid of them. That boy will never share in the inheritance with my son, Isaac." Genesis 21 verse 10. Abraham was torn. Ishmael was his son too. His first son. He had raised him, loved him, watched him grow. But God spoke clearly. "Listen to Sarai. Do what she says. Isaac will be the child of the promise. But don't worry, I will also make a nation from Ishmael, because he is your son." Genesis 21 verses 12 to 13. And so, early the next morning, Abraham packed water and bread, placed them on Hagar's shoulder, and handed her the boy. No words could soften the moment. No fatherly hug. No final prayer. Just silence, and then steps away. Banished. Again. The desert opened wide before her. The sun rose higher, cruel and unrelenting. Hagar and Ishmael wandered aimlessly. The water ran out. The bread was gone. Ishmael stumbled, weak from thirst. Hagar couldn't bear it anymore. She placed him under a bush and walked away. "I cannot watch my son die," she sobbed. Genesis 21 verse 16. She sat down a short distance away and wept loudly. But even in that wilderness of hopelessness, heaven was not deaf. God heard the cries of the boy. And once again, the angel of God called out to Hagar. "What's wrong, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying where he lies. Get up, lift him up, and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation." Genesis 21 verses 17 to 18. Then, right there in front of her, God opened her eyes. A well. Water. Life. She rushed over, filled the skin, and gave the boy a drink. Strength returned. Hope breathed again. God had not forgotten her. Not then. Not ever. From that day on, Ishmael lived in the desert and became a skilled archer. He grew strong, just as God had said. Hagar found him a wife from Egypt, her homeland. And though they never returned to Abraham's camp, the legacy of the boy who was heard by God lived on. 6 powerful lessons from Hagar's story. 1. God sees you, even when no one else does. 2. Your pain is not hidden from heaven. 3. You are not forgotten, even in your darkest desert. 4. What man casts aside, God still carries forward. 5. God's promises don't need a perfect past, they need a willing heart. 6. Sometimes, what looks like the end is just the beginning of a greater journey. So when you feel invisible, betrayed, or lost, remember Hagar. And remember the God who sees. LROI. He saw her. And he sees you too. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, and turn on the notification bell so you get notified when we post.